Russian President Vladimir Putin has praised Donald Trump after a new ceasefire agreement for southern Syria was reached. Mr. Putin said the truce was the result of the U.S. changing its stance and becoming more pragmatic about the situation there. Speaking at a news conference at the G20 summit in Hamburg, the Russian leader was referring to a ceasefire and de-escalation agreement for southwestern Syria reached by the United States, Russia and Jordan. Mr. Putin also welcomed the news that the U.S. had appointed a new envoy to try to solve the Ukraine crisis. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has chosen Kurt Volker, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, to lead U.S. diplomacy on the Ukraine crisis, saying he had moved to fill the position after being urged to do so by the Russian leader. Mr. Putin said certain precursors had been established for improved relations between Russia and the U.S. He said he had established personal relations with Mr. Trump and added the U.S. president is very different than on TV. The pair had agreed to the new ceasefire agreement for Syria in their first face-to-face meeting. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Hamburg for talks in which they also discussed the war in Ukraine, the North Korean nuclear crisis, cybersecurity. But the highly anticipated meeting began with what Mr. Tillerson described as a very robust and lengthy exchange about Russian interference last year's presidential election, in which Mr. Putin demanded proof of alleged Kremlin involvement. Speaking alongside Mr. Putin before their meeting, Mr. Trump called it an honor to meet the Russian president and that he looked forward to positive things happening in the relationship. He said, "We've had some very, very good talks. We're going to have a talk now and obviously that will continue. We look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia, for the United States and for everybody concerned." Mr. Putin said they had spoken over the phone about important bilateral and international issues, but phone conversations are obviously not enough. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she was pleased Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin had finally met and expressed hope the dialogue between the two leaders would continue. Speaking at the end of the G20 summit, she said there were certain problems in the world that could only be solved through cooperation between the U.S. and Russia. She said, "It can only be a good thing if there is an honest, frank dialogue." Mr. Putin said Moscow and Berlin had good relations and pledged Russia would not interfere in parliamentary elections in Germany in September.